Ladies and gentlemen, get ready to embark on a journey like no other. Welcome to the Glum Lot Podcast,
your go-to destination for a unique blend of recovery and discovery.
I'm Brett.
And I'm Mark. And in this podcast, we will endeavor to create a safe and uplifting space for our guests and listeners to share their stories with sincerity and a touch of humor.
Remember, we are not a Glum Lot. The Glum Lot Podcast is more than just a source of entertainment. It's a beacon of hope, proving that even in the darkest moments, recovery is possible. Every story we share carries the power to inspire positive change.
So buckle up, get ready to listen, and join us in discovering the strength that lies within every individual's journey. This is the Glum Lot Podcast, where humor meets hope. All right, Brett, welcome to episode number 68 of the Glum Lot Podcast.
Hi, Mark.
I'm glad you're here.
I'm glad you're here.
Oh,
I am elated, over the moon, sit on my hands to keep from clapping,
right.
Excited.
Yeah, I'm glad. So
Whatever.
So today's agenda, I just wanted to, I got this book, 101 Common Cliches of Alcoholics Anonymous by Bob Tolan.
Yeah, find it on Amazon,
Yeah.
Kindle and print.
Somebody had talked to me about this book, and then my wife went out and bought it for me like 2 days later. I think it was you.
Yeah.
And it's got all of the sayings, and then it goes on and tells where that came from and what it means and all this stuff.
That's what I love about it, because it tells you where it is in the big book and how it applies.
So
it's
here's a couple quick good ones. This one says, if you don't have a sponsor, your addiction will gladly sponsor you. If you don't get this program, stick around until it gets you.
If you hang out in a barber shop, you're likely going to get a haircut.
Pour me another drink. But I found this one. I thought it was pretty wise, and it says relapse is a process, not an event. And what they're getting at in general with this is that most of the times people relapse, it's not a snap thing. It's been a long time coming because you've been doing all this stuff that's keeping your sobriety on track. And every time somebody comes back from a drink, it's always the same story. I got away from meetings. I didn't call my sponsor. I stopped talking to people in the fellowship, and eventually it falls away. And maybe they don't drink right away.
Yeah, we heard some stories of that last night.
But eventually they stop maintaining their sobriety, and it just withers.
Yeah.
And that's what they're talking about when they say that it's not just a one-time snappy thing.
And you're always sharing your story with your experience of that.
Yeah.
And that's been good for me to hear.
And, it will slowly, imperceptibly creep up on you. So I know that, from what happened with me is that you get away from, you're going to 4 meetings a week.
Yeah.
Then you cut it down to 2, and you're like, see, I'm good. Then you cut it down to 1. You're like, well, a meeting a week
and you
is not
justify
bad.
it.
Yeah, you justify it,
course.
and you're doing okay. And then all of a sudden you go 2 weeks without a meeting. You're like, I'm okay.
Yeah.
And you probably do feel okay. But somewhere in the back of your sobriety, it's crumbling.
Yeah.
You just can't see it.
Yeah, your foundation isn't as firm.
And that disease is a disease of denial, telling you don't have a disease anyway. And if you did, it's gone. And a couple months go by, and all of a sudden you find yourself in a position where there's alcohol available, and you're defenseless again. And you're like, how the hell did this happen?
Yep.
Because
there is
and
no
if you're
cure.
if you're really lucky, you make it back.
That's right.
Because some people don't.
Boy, oh boy. That's no joke.
So there's a lot of meetings where you get that cautionary tale when people come back and tell you that. Yeah.
Yep, it's helped me because I didn't have that part of my, and I hate to say not yet, but, it's because of those stories that I realized, this is what I got to do.
Yeah, so the moral of the story is keep coming back.
That's right.
And
Stay involved.
So we have a guest today, not only a guest on the show remotely, but we have a guest that's going to be a host today with us.
Yeah, that's going to be I don't know how anybody would even guess who this could be.
Yes, let's welcome our third host for the day that is got more insight into this subject we're going to discuss today.
I'm excited about it.
And that would be Matt Y. from episode 1.
Welcome back.
Glad to be back.
Episode 1, episode 51.
I can hear everybody cheering that he's
podcast
back.
about a podcast. This guy's all over the place.
Yes.
Your guys' interviews.
Yeah. Our episodes, Brett and I's episodes. So
I was listening to that intro.
Yeah.
I felt a little little personal towards me, if I'm being honest.
No, it wasn't.
You know, we
towards
always
you.
think that people are thinking at us, don't you?
You've been thinking. I like that.
You've been thinking
You've
at
been
me.
thinking at me. Damn it. Matt's been out of town on vacation. Then he got sick, and then he got into a 4-day golf event, and so he's got to go to a meeting tomorrow.
I will. I will be at a meeting tomorrow afternoon.
Oh, look at you. So why don't you tell us a little bit about this guest before we meet him? Because we're going to be meeting him remotely.
Yeah, so I've actually never met him myself. I've only met him remotely myself.
Okay.
He's a guy that when I first got out of rehab, and we've talked about it on here, the yellow balloon groups, right?
Yeah.
So I knew right away, I knew these things existed.
Wait, can you explain that to the listener?
Yeah, so you're a big fan of going to concerts.
Exactly.
Right?
So the yellow balloon groups, it started with the Grateful Dead, I believe. Mm-hmm. And what it is it's a community of people that go to these concerts, typically like jam bands and things like that.
Yeah.
These shows that are strongly associated with drugs and alcohol, let's be honest.
And give us some exampms of some jam bands.
So you got Grateful Dead, Fish has got one.
Billy Strings.
Billy Strings, I've been to his.
What's that one? That was just recently.
Goose.
Yeah, Goose.
Goose.
I like that.
Goose has got one, and they all have different names based on songs and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And Benji, who we're going to have on the podcast today, I met him through Much Obliged, which was the Humphreys McGee Yellow Balloon Group, which is another jam band. Humphreys McGee is one of my favorite bands of all
Where
time.
did this term Yellow Balloon Group come from?
So I think it was just started becoming all-encompassing. When you go to the shows, the way that you spot these people is with a yellow balloon.
Artifacts, right?
The table will have a yellow balloon attached to it. Sometimes you'll see a yellow balloon in the crowd. And so it was basically a way for sober people at the concerts to find people like them.
You're not alone.
So you have this whole community of people in what would typically be a dangerous environment if you were there by yourself.
Right.
Who are all there enjoying the music, clean and sober.
Yeah.
And
so you mentioned that there's sometimes a table. What is the table all
table
about?
is where they'll do meetings at set break. So most concerts, you got first set, second set.
Mm-hmm.
There's usually a 15-minute set break in the middle. And during that set break, you meet at the table, and they'll do a condensed 15-minute AA meeting. Just kind
So
of
cool.
a check-in with everybody. And it's not associated with AA. All addictions are welcome. But it follows kind of the 12-step preamble and things like that. And then... the table also is a place where people can go during the show. Say you're there and you're feeling a little squirrely. You can go to the table. There's always going to be somebody there if you just need somebody to talk to. They also have candy.
Okay.
Nice.
But aren't there stickers too out in the crowd?
There's stickers that say one show at a time.
Okay. And so you see somebody with a sticker and they'll say, "Hey, how you doing?"
Yeah. Sometimes they'll give you a little tap on the shoulder, just say,
doing
"Hey,
okay?"
yeah, you good?" That's actually when I was at the Goose Show. That's how I found there wasn't a table at that show.
Okay.
So nobody brought the table that week, but I saw a guy with a one show at a time shirt on, and I go, "Where's the meeting?" And he goes, "This
awesome.
tree." And so next thing you know, we've got 16, 17 people hanging out at this tree, and they ended up having a long set break. We had basically a full meeting.
Oh, no shit.
Yeah, it was like a half hour. We had and so we had a full meeting. Everybody got a chance to share.
Wow.
I think that was my 1 year. I think it was my 1 year anniversary, like on the day.
Wow, that's
I
pretty
think
fantastic.
it was the best way.
So this just supports the fact that we are not a glum lot. Life
Right.
isn't over, and we can still enjoy these things.
I didn't get
right?
sober to be miserable.
Right.
Yeah. And here's another thing. It's like, you know what? We're going to go to concerts and stay sober anyway.
That's right.
Yeah.
F you.
Yeah.
Right.
And so Benji is somebody that I don't even know if he remembered me when I hit him up online to ask him to be on the podcast, but he was gracious enough to agree.
It won't be long. He'll
And,
remember you.
And so I found them, I got COVID early in sobriety and went on the Zoom meetings for Much Obliged and saw them through there. And then I've just been kind of creeping on them ever since online.
And so what is Benji's history with this?
I have no idea. Can't wait to find out.
We're gonna find out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, let's not wait. Let's welcome our guest, Benji.
Benji.
Welcome to the Glum Lot Podcast, Benji. We're glad to have you here.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
And we like to start with your sobriety date, if possible.
My sobriety date is Labor Day of 2004.
Okay,
Nice.
Labor Day. Wow, must have been quite a weekend.
20 years.
It
Right.
was.
And just for the listener, we have Matt here because Matt has experienced these yellow balloon groups. And besides the actual yellow balloon group stories, we wanted to hear a little bit about your personal story as well, if you don't mind sharing. just a
sure.
quick little synopsis of how you arrived at sobriety. And we like to start with how you got started when you were young, with your first introduction to drinking and/or drugs.
All the details.
Yeah. So my first time getting high, this is going to sound strange, but I was 7 years old. I didn't know that I was getting high, but I was born in Israel, and we moved to America and actually Canada. And the first time I went to a real dentist, he put the little mask over my nose and said, "Hey,
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
we're gonna do some stuff here, but I'm gonna turn this thing on, and once I do, you're gonna feel a little funny, and if you don't, let me know, and I'll turn it up a little bit." And he turned the nitrous tank on, and immediately I remember the feeling of normal, of feeling like this is what people talk about when they say that they're comfortable in their skin, right? This is the idea, like the committee in my head is quiet and I just feel okay. And he goes, "Do you feel that?" And I said, "No, you should turn it up a lited bit."
Yeah, like Oliver Twist. Please,
You know,
sir.
like
Yeah, have more.
exactly. I was like,
3 for $20, no deals.
Bill describes like I have arrived. Like that's exactly how I felt. Like I didn't have that vocabulary at the time because I was 7, but it was this feeling of I finally feel like what humans describe their experience of just being still.
Yeah.
And so I was in, and I remember when he finished, he was like, "Okay, we're going to turn this off now, and in a minute you'll feel normal again." And I was like, No, don't do that. Just leave me here." And he was like, he laughed. He thought I was joking. I was like, "I'm not kidding. Just let me chill here with this thing on my face because I feel good."
So you were
And
already that uncomfortable with who you were?
100%. 100%.
Yeah.
I did not feel comfortable in my skin. I had the self-esteem or self-worth of a gnat. I
Yeah.
was completely self-centered, and at the same time had zero self-worth. And I just, it's a sad thought, especially as a parent,
Right.
knowing that my kids might be experiencing that, and I hope that they aren't.
And where did it go from there?
Well, I'm luckily I didn't have the vocabulary to understand that I was getting high or that drugs or alcohol were the solution for my problem. But my father, who wouldn't appreciate me pointing a finger at him, but he's no longer here, so he can't stop me, was also an addict. And so not so much drugs, but alcohol was fairly accessible in my house. My dad was the rabbi of the synagogue that I went to, and I remember being like 12 years old and sneaking shots of Canadian Club and getting in trouble for it. And this like 70, 80-year-old man was like, "You're doing it wrong. You need to spill the cup and then soak up the whiskey with a little bit of cake and then just eat the cake and then you won't get in trouble." And I was like, "Oh my God, this dude's fucking brilliant." Like
You're so wise.
so wise,
Thank you,
right? Like this
Obi-Wan.
is what I'm doing. Like this is why I come to synagogue, to learn tricks like that.
Right.
And getting drunk off of a pound cake full of Canadian Club at 12 years old was like, oh, this is how to feel normal.
Yeah.
And then they shipped me off to boarding school for high school. I was 14 years old, and somebody offered me pot, and I was like, "Oh, that smells like my parents' room." And I was like, I was off to the races. And I didn't last very long at that school, 1 year, and then they sent me to school in DC. And in DC, my hyper paranoia sort of kicked in, and I was like, that guy's parents works for the government, that guy's parents work for the government, that guy's parents work for the government, so I'm the fall guy, so I'm going to steer clear from drugs and I'm just going to focus on alcohol. And that's really where my isolation and solitude kicked in, where I was just, I was a lonely 10th, 11th, 12th grader who went out and partied with their friends, my friends, but didn't do anything wild or extravagant, drug or alcohol related. And then I went back to my room, my dorm room, and just sat there and drank and listened to music. And again, being the parent of two teenagers now, like that is a really sad thought, not for myself, but thinking about my kids having those types of feelings.
So you made it through high school, though? You graduated?
Plot twist.
Plot twist. I was expelled from my high school at graduation, but I had already been accepted to college, so I didn't care. As soon as I graduated high school, moved out of DC, my drug world sort of opened up, and I was like, I can do whatever I want now because I'm not in DC. And I made it 3.5 years of college before flunking out. All my friends graduated and got jobs and did amazing things, and I sunk to the bottom.
Isolated.
By the time
Were you noticing at all the progression of the disease? Were you drinking more often, more heavily?
drinking in high school was not a daily occurrence. It was whenever I could occurrence. It was if I had to go a couple of days without it, it was unpleasant, but manageable. By the time I graduated high school and they were already sending me to AA when I was graduating high school. They were like, "You need help. This is a problem."
Wow.
Who was that? That was your parents sending you?
It was the principal of the high school that I was at.
So you went to your first meeting when you were a senior in high school?
I went to my first meeting like the week that I graduated.
And what was your first meeting like? Were you just like, I don't belong here. This is kind of stupid.
So the first meeting that I went to was actually an English-speaking AA meeting in Israel. And
No kidding.
Wow.
Yeah. And there was a dude in there who looked like the dad from the album cover from the Sublime album. And he was like, had a wife beater on, and he smoked an entire pack of cigarettes during the meeting. And, there was a girl in there that looked like something out of a Tim Burton movie. And I just remember thinking, like, these people are fucking
Caroline.
wild. Like, it was
Her name was Lucy Fur.
exactly.
It probably
Like,
wasn't cool for you, but
I mean,
that sounds awesome that you could find a meeting like that in Israel.
yeah. I mean, these people were pretty. These were sick people, and I wasn't a sick person. I was just a guy who liked drinking by myself, to obliteration. I wasn't as bad as
Right.
them.
So you didn't find your home there yet.
No,
So you continued down this path, and where did it lead you?
So I refound drugs and really enjoyed the drug experience. A lot of hallucinogens. I really enjoyed the uppers and downers. Don't need to name or explain to you guys how to use. I'm sure you're familiar. But I really enjoyed the cocktail of uppers and downers, and so I fancied myself a Hunter S. Thompson fan, and so I was like, I should do stuff like that. And so you read some of Hunter S. Thompson stuff, and that's what I was attempting to do. And
So who's Hunter S. Thompson? I gotta know.
Should I tell him about the bats?
he'll find out eventually.
Okay.
Hunter S. Thompson wrote the book Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas.
Okay. Yeah.
And so I basically spent 3 or 4 years trying to emulate that. And what I found was partying was fun, except I couldn't stop, and then I was partying even though it wasn't fun. And everybody else what's that?
Is this when you were getting introduced into kind of the music scene as well? Or
Yes.
were you already?
Yeah. So I was introduced to, my father was a musician. My uncle was a musician. I loved music my entire life. I always loved music. I always listened to music. In high school, my favorite TV shows were MTV Unplugged and VH1 Behind the Music and VH1 Storytellers. Like I'm a music junkie. And in high school, I was listening to everything from the metal and Metallica and rap and 90s hip hop, and my friend introduced me to the world of like Fish and the Grateful Dead and Dave Matthews
all
Band.
good
and,
in the 90s, man. It
right?
was all good.
I was the same kind of way when I was a kid, except my favorite TV show was The Monkees.
Was what?
The Monkees.
It was the Monkees, exactly.
They weren't even a real band.
So we were watching that in the 90s, but we were watching that ironically.
Yes, of course. Yeah.
So
Get that.
yeah, so I got into the music scene in the 90s, in the late 90s, listening to Fish and the Dead and Mo and String Cheese Incident, and
So
those
would
bands
you
were just
go
starting to come
to
up.
would you go to these jam band concerts and just get fucked up?
Not in high school. The boarding school that I went to was pretty strict, and so I managed to sneak out to a handful of concerts in high school, but not many. A lot of I don't know how I made it to a bunch of Chili Peppers concerts and
Oh man, nice.
Foo Fighters. Seeing Foo Fighters in the '90s was pretty awesome. I did not make it to any jam band shows in the '90s. It wasn't until the 2000s when I was in college. But between 2000 and 2004, I would guesstimate that I probably saw 250 concerts or so.
Come on.
I was just going strong. I mean,
Amazing.
I was seeing, 10, 15, 20 Fish shows in a row, in a matter of 2 or 3 weeks. Same thing with the Dead and Mo.
Were you the kind of a guy that would go there and just fall right into the whole drug culture, hippie, just the whole, I hate to say hippie.
Were you a lot kid?
I was a lot kid.
Yeah, I don't speak the lingo.
Yes, and I was also like the dumb kind of lot kid where I was under the impression that in order to be a real hippie and be like a real music fan, I had to not shower for weeks at a time, or like I shouldn't brush my hair, or I shouldn't like wash my clothes. I should just wear the same thing for weeks at a time. And my friends were like, "What the fuck is wrong with you?" And I was like, "I don't know. I'm just trying to fit in, man." And they're like, "Take a fucking shower."
You'll fit in better.
Exactly. We'll tolerate you.
Yeah. So you're on this path of doing all these shows, and are you working during this time or no?
I was moving things around to make sure that I had enough money to live, but nothing that I would ever claim on
how
any
did you
taxes
go
or
to
talk about on the
200 and
podcast.
some shows. I mean,
It's there's people that do it. I mean, you go, you sell grilled cheese sandwiches.
okay.
I mean, there's ways. There's people that tour all over the country.
There were times when I'd like buy cases of beer and a bag of ice and put it in a cooler, and then after the show, I would just stand outside and sell beers that I bought for $1.25 for $5.
Entrepreneur.
Well, you what you got to do, right?
I mean, that's a very generous term.
So what during this period, what was happening to your drug and alcohol use? Was it starting to spiral out of control at all?
So 2 things were happening. Number one, I was using more, and I was using more aggressively. And the second thing is I was using by myself in addition to at the party. So, my friends finished partying at 11, 12, or 1 or 2 in the morning, and then would get up to go to school the next day. And at 12 or 2, whenever they went to bed, that's when I got active. And that's when I would either get higher and go wander the New York City, or I'd get higher and I'd paint, or I'd do more drugs and, stare at a wall for the next 8 hours. I was just, bedtime for everybody else was, my, get comfortable with myself, because now that everybody's gone, I can actually really get fucked, really
I've
just
stared at
go,
some really
go for
cool walls in my day.
Say it again.
I've stared at some really cool walls in my day.
Yeah, those things are awesome. Those things are awesome.
So you're using a lot of loan, and you mentioned at one point that it became not fun anymore. At what point was that?
I can't give you a specific date.
Right.
I don't know the answer to that, but I can tell you that it happened quick. I was 20.
So the lifestyle kept going, but you weren't happy.
Yeah, I mean, I was isolating way too much. I was by myself, and more importantly, like I'd wake up every morning and I'd say, today's a day that I'm just going to like try to live a normal life. And before I left my room, I was already not living a normal life. I was already getting high. I was already getting drunk. I was lying to my friends because I wasn't telling them that I was doing these things, or I wasn't telling everybody. There was nobody that I was telling everything to. I was triangulating, and not because I was sophisticated enough to know to do that. That was just the insanity that I was living in. And then at night, I was going to bed, praying to gods that I didn't believe in to take me out, because I was miserable and I wanted to absolutely die. And I was just not I'm going to use air quotes and say brave enough to do it, properly. I was scared of that.
Did there
and so
come
I
a
just,
point at which something changed in your life with that and the way you felt?
are you referring to getting worse or a moment of clarity getting better?
A moment of clarity.
Yeah. So there's one important piece that I should
Sure.
mention
Yeah.
before that, and that is in 10th grade, I'm in this religious boarding school, and I've asked 100 questions of these clergy members, and every answer that they've given me is insufficient. And I remember the room that I was in and the people that I was with and the conversation that we were having when I said, "Oh, you people are believing in fucking fairy tales. None of this is true. None of this makes any sense. You're all fucking crazy. I'm an atheist." And they're like, "You're not an atheist. You just aren't asking the right questions." And I said, "What do you mean I'm not asking the right questions? You're not even able to answer the questions that I am asking. So why do you need me to ask?" And so that really became an important part of sort of my identity. And spent a couple years sort of mocking anybody who believed in any sort of God or anything like that.
I'm just getting over that part.
So moment of clarity, I was at Madison Square Garden for a 3-night run of Widespread Panic for Halloween 2003.
Nice.
And it was after show parties of the Disco Biscuits, I believe, at the Hammerstein Ballroom, but somebody may correct me. I don't remember for sure if it was the Hammerstein. And it was the third night, and we were absolutely just blasted. And I ran out of cocaine in the middle of the show. And so I started walking around Madison Square Garden looking for cocaine. And this, as I remember her, 5'2", 100-pound, blonde hair, blue eyed girl dressed as like a farm girl or something, wearing plaid and pigtails, pushes me away from her and says, "Dude, get the fuck away from me. We're trying to enjoy our favorite band. Why are you bothering us?" And I was like, damn, I hate when people bother me when I'm at concerts. Like, I became one of those people, and I had a head full of hallucinogens, and that just set me off. And I had this monumentally bad trip realizing that I became one of those people. And I hate those people, right? Those people are annoying. And somehow I've become one of those people. And then it was at that moment that I went from knowing that I was a sick person and that I used differently than other people to the realization that my lie to myself of I'm not as bad as those people. One of the things I used to tell myself was that I'm not as bad as those people because those people are IV users. I'm not an IV user. I'm too sophisticated for that, right? I'm better than those people. And what I realized in that moment was that I was not better than those people. I just used differently than those people, and that my misery and the way that I used was the the common denominator, and not the fact
wasn't
that
your own. And it wasn't your own misery. You were starting to cause some misery to other people at that point that day, right?
I did not have that self-awareness. It was just that, it was complete self-absorption, right? Like the realization, my sponsor tells me that the realization that I'm the biggest piece of shit in the world is still self-absorption. Like, that's still my ego because I think that I'm the biggest shit in the world,
Yeah, right.
So,
It's true.
So what happened as a result of this realization?
So that was when I started to try to get sober. And I was too good in my head. I was too good to go to rehab or do anything like that. So I just hugged the toilet and, tried to, white knuckle through days and weeks at a time, and then relapse, and then days and weeks at a time, and then relapse, and days and weeks at a time, and then relapse. And just an unpleasant, I kept on saying, all I got to do is make it till this next whatever milestone, and then I'll be fine. And, days or weeks and relapse, and just over and over again. And again, we're not talking about I wasn't in my 40s. This wasn't decades. I was 22 at the time. So, it felt like forever, but I was still fairly young. And not fairly young. I was still young.
Yeah.
And I was coming up to Labor Day of 2004. I was about to move from New York to Detroit, and I was at a music festival that my friends and I went to every year called Modown, and this is in upstate New York.
Yep.
And
It's near us, kind of.
was that?
It's like an hour and a half away from us.
Yep. Yeah. So it's in Utica. So it's Friday afternoon. We set up our tents, and my friends say to me, actually, let me pause for 1 second and just go back. And because we're talking about yellow balloons, I want to give an important detail.
Sure.
Earlier that summer in 2004, I was trying to stay sober and trying to keep my shit together, and I was really struggling. And I went to one of 10 or 15 Fish concerts that I was going to that summer. For Matt and anybody else who's a Fish fan, it was the night in Brooklyn that Jay-Z came out and played with Fish.
Yep.
Wow.
And there's a sober group of Fish fans called the Fellowship, and I didn't want to go talk to them because those people are losers and they need programs and sponsors and all that stuff, and I don't need any of that shit. I'm better than that. I'm not that's a religious cult. I'm not doing that. But I was struggling that night, and so I walked by the table and just kind of stood 20 feet away from them, watching and hoping to absorb through osmosis a little bit of good juju or something. And this woman named Georgie, covered in tattoos, total old school hippie mama, walks over to me and says, "Hey man, you've been eyeballing the table for the last 20 minutes or so, and you look pretty shitty. Are you okay?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm fine." She's like, "You want to come talk? What's going on?" And I was like, "Okay, if you want to know." And I just sort of word vomited all over her. And she put her arm around me and said, "Let me introduce you to some friends. You're with us now, and we love you." And she walked me over to the table and introduced me to a whole bunch of people. And I was like, holy shit, these people are cool, and they give a shit, and they like me just because I'm standing here. There was no qualification necessary other than me, needing help and wanting to be there.
Right.
And it was amazing.
Best. Yeah.
Absolutely amazing.
Totally foreign.
Totally fucking foreign. There was no transaction required in the relationship. There was
this
nothing.
exist?
There was no litmus test of cool. None of that.
Did you see any irony in a Fish fan calling something else a cult?
Hey now.
Right?
That's it's a unpleasant perspective right there.
So from that night, how did you proceed?
So I checked in with the Fellowship pretty much every night after that. Though they became my people. A few weeks later, I was at Alpine Valley in Wisconsin, and I heard a guy say, "Hi, I'm Maiko. I live in Detroit," and gave a share. And I was like, "Hey man, I'm moving to Detroit in 2 months." And he just gave me his phone number, and he's like, "Call me when you get here." And that dude stood up at my wedding, and we are good friends. And I just went to see Willie Nelson and Bob Dylan with him on Sunday night of this week. It's been 20 years. We're family. But at the end of that summer was this music festival, Modown, and we set up our campsite. And my friends say to me, "Hey man, in a couple of weeks you're moving to Detroit, and the band's breaking up. Not talking about Fish, talking about us. You're moving away. We're not going to be together." I had strung together a little bit of sobriety, and they're like, "Just clink the glass with us one more time, man." And they did not have to convince me. I was like, that makes total fucking sense. And so I clinked the glass with them. And that was Friday afternoon, and I woke up late Saturday night, early Sunday morning in the medic tent. And I was in pretty bad fucking shape. And I had no idea what happened between clinking a glass and waking up with the medics. And, they took care of me for a little bit, and then sort of gave me a pat on the ass and told me, "Go get him, Tiger." They released me to the wild. And I went to the Happy Hour Heroes camping area. Happy Hour Heroes are the sober Mo fans, the equivalent of the Fellowship for Mo fans. And I sat down there, and they knew who I was because they'd seen me all summer. And they gave me some soup, and they gave me some coffee, and they gave me a blanket. And, we sat there around a campfire and talked. I don't know if there was a campfire there. We sat around something warm. And, maybe it was the soup in my hands. I don't remember exactly. But some of the details are slightly fuzzy. But, there was a guy, Marcus, who just kicked my... Sorry. There was a guy, Marcus, who just verbally kicked my butt and was like, "You're going to die if you continue doing this. Like, you just proved that experiment again." And, there was people in that circle that night who I'm still friends with today, who I still speak to regularly today. And they're like, "You don't ever have to do this again." And I was like, "I believe you. I just don't fucking know how, like it doesn't work." And they told me to work a program, and I was like, "No, I don't want to do that." And mainly for the fear of detoxing a little bit of piss and vinegar in my veins and wanting to prove other people wrong, I just white knuckled it. I absolutely refused to work a program because I was absolutely convinced that I was replacing one addiction with another, one cult with another. And I just, I wasn't going to do books and sponsors and meetings and, all that stuff, steps. I mean, it all sounded awful. And about 14 months later, I was hanging out with a group of sober friends, and I was talking about how miserable I was. And this girl's like, "How miserable?" And I'm like, "I think about driving my car off the road every day." Like,
Pretty miserable.
Pretty fucking miserable, you know? Like, the only thing that I hate more than me is you,
That
like
qualifies.
I'm miserable. And she said, "But we're stupid because we work a program." And I'm like, "Yeah." And she goes, "And you think we're stupid because the program doesn't work?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And she's like, "Well, what if I told you that working the program of Alcoholics Anonymous wasn't about learning how to not drink? You've already done that. What if I told you working the program of Alcoholics Anonymous was about learning how to change your life so that you can just be happy and not have to have the desire to drink?" And that was the moment that changed my life, because that was the moment that I heard the message. And I was like, "Okay, I'm in. I'll give it a shot. I'm miserable and desperate enough today to do whatever you tell me to do." She was like, "Okay."
You're still pretty young at this point, right? You're still what, 22?
I was 23.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
That's wild to have that.
I can't even imagine looking back on myself at 23 years old.
Yeah.
I tried it. I tried it
Oh,
at 23, and
That's a testament to the people you were
went on
hanging
another
out with.
12-year run after that.
yeah.
My God.
Well, I had just finished using up my lifetime supply of drugs and alcohol. And so like I had no choice. I was fucking miserable. I had the gift of desperation. I was like, I want to die, and I want to not want to die.
Yeah.
And I got a sponsor, and I worked the steps, and I went to big book meetings, and I dove in, and
Did the deal.
That's the deal, man. Like, I still have a sponsor, and I still go to meetings, and I still do big book studies, and I still do the steps.
Why do you do that?
Because I want to not want to die.
That's right. Yeah.
I'm assuming also that you work with other people, right?
I do.
Yeah, that's an awesome payoff on that.
How long did it take you? You mentioned kind of writing God off at a pretty young age. How long into your journey into the program did it take you to put that aside or get over it? I don't know if you have gotten over it or develop that concept of a higher power. This is something that I've struggled big time with.
I'm proud of you for bringing that up.
Yeah,
Great question.
And I still struggle with it to an extent. But I'm curious to get kind of your point of view, because it sounds like we came in here with similar ideas. And I don't know a ton about you, but just from following you on social media and stuff like that, it seems like you're pretty active in your religion and things like that. So.
Yes. Great question. And hold on to your shoes, because I'm about to change your life.
Okay.
Oh, yes. We've been trying, so please. No.
So I went back to Modown 4 years later. It was my 4-year anniversary. And I'm sitting with the same dude, Marcus, and the same woman, Amanda, and the same dude, Bill. three of the 4 or 5 people that were there on that night. And I'm getting a 4-year anniversary coin, and I'm with a bunch of friends, and I'm sharing, and I said, I got to be honest with you guys. I don't really think I've done 2 or 3 because I don't believe in any of this shit. Like, it doesn't, like, get the fuck out of here.
Man.
And Bill said to me, Benji, if you're having a problem with the God thing, work the 12 steps and you'll be contacted shortly. And I was like, what do you mean? And he said, you don't have to understand shit. Do the work. And as your life changes, you'll get there. And I was like, oh, I don't need to have an understanding of what a higher power is. I just have to do the work and feel better. And my life, as my life gets better, I'll develop a relationship with something greater than myself. That changed my life because I immediately was able to put aside all the prejudice and all the disdain and all the blatant disregard is not the right word. It was like my dad used to tell me that religion still controlled my life because if he told me to go left, I would go right, and if he told me to go to up, I would go down. And he's like, you might not be listening to me, but religion still controls your life. And I was like, you fucker. Like, I hated that. He was right. But in that moment, everything changed because I was able to just let go.
Wow.
Surrender to the flow, if you will. And what I have found is I am very comfortable with my higher power today. I'm very comfortable with a something that I call God just because it's either easier than saying higher power of my understanding. And so I just use the word God, but I also tell you that I don't believe in God. And when people say, what do you mean you don't believe in God? I don't believe in an old man who's holding a clipboard of a set of rules that he made and then watching you and judging you and saying, well, the ledger today is this, right? Like God's doing my 10th step every night, right? You did do this and you didn't do that. Like, I don't believe in that God. I don't believe in a God who's got, angels doing his bidding. I don't believe in a God that controls football games. And I don't believe in a God who does all that stuff. What I do believe is that most other people's kids are a pain in the ass and are annoying, snotty little brats, but I will tell you that mine are the most amazing in the world because I love them dearly. And not only that, the people that I love, my friends and family, their children, I also love them. And I'll be somewhere and I'll see a shirt and I'll be like, I should buy this shirt for my friend's kid because they would appreciate that. That's my higher power. When I see somebody who I knew as a crackhead who literally couldn't get through 24 hours without smoking crack, and he's got 7 years sober today. That's my higher power.
Yeah,
the ability to sit in a room with degenerates and criminals and laugh about horrific trauma that happened to us
And love them.
and love them. That's my higher power. And that is way more powerful than me. And I only got that by working the 12 steps, and it reached out to me.
That's awesome. That's really cool. So are you religious at all then? Or no, would you say?
So the answer is, I'm Jewish. I was born in Israel. My father was an Orthodox rabbi. My grandfather was a rabbi. I'm like steeped in it. I participate in Jewish events because I believe in the culture, and we have a very rich history and a very rich culture and a lot of deep connections to my history and my culture. I separate that. They refer to Judaism as a ethno-religion, right? So there's a nationhood, there's a religion, and there's also a culture and community. And so I sort of, for myself, strip out the religious side of it, and I'm involved in the community and cultural and historical side of it. For the purposes of recovery, I generally don't talk about what happened on October 7th and how that affected me in recovery settings. But I will tell you that since October 7th, I have been a lot more involved in Jewish community activity and activism because that sort of ignited something in me. but again, stripping out the religious side and focused more on the cultural and historical side. And if anybody wants to ask me questions about that, I'm pretty easy to find on Facebook or Instagram. I'm happy to talk more about that, but for the purposes of, recovery being accessible to everybody, I don't think that this is the place to talk about that.
For sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Hey, you got to answer this burning question for me. The fuck is a lot kid? I want to know.
All right. I think all the three of us should write down an answer, and then we'll read each other's answers and see how accurate they are. Lot kid generally refers to the people who hang out in the parking lots of concerts and are steeped in the culture, so to speak. So if you
Kinda
see
like tailgating.
What's that? The tailgating.
It's extreme tailgating.
extreme tailgating,
Yeah, it's like
okay.
if you never left the tailgate.
Okay.
Let's say you
and
lived
never
at the-
went to the game?
Sometimes you don't go to the game. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. The addicts don't go to the game every time.
Yeah.
Right.
The normies go to the game every time.
So I'm going to kind of hand it over to Matt, and I just want to, as an older guy who's never heard until Matt about yellow balloon groups, I've never experienced them. I'd like to know about them.
This has already been one of my favorite interviews so far. I feel like we're finally in my wheelhouse. You know?
All right, let's teach the people.
Oh yeah, for sure. So I guess you got exposed to yellow balloon groups pretty early on. What do you guys? 20 years this year? Have you hit 20 yet?
So a couple weeks ago was my 20-year anniversary.
Congratulations, that's awesome.
Thank you.
And so that's what's wild about this program, is when I think of somebody with 20 years, I think of somebody that looks like Mark.
Wow.
But that's amazing. I guess so. Talk to me more about how you got more involved in the yellow balloon community.
Yeah. So got sober, started working a program, wanted to continue, service work, and found myself in a position in early recovery that I didn't have a ton of money, and concert tickets were more expensive, and I wanted to go to shows. And so I was like, hey, does anybody need a volunteer? And so I volunteered to work tables. And really quickly, when I say really quickly, immediately remembered the way that Georgie approached me. And I heard people talk about service work, and I was like, this isn't work. This is hosting. This is the idea that like I'm a table host, and my job is to be an attractive message bearer for recovery in the music scene. And I can't say I did it well every time.
Can you explain just what the role of working
so
the table is like? Yeah.
So there are probably a dozen bands or so that have this yellow balloon community where there's a table at the concert where people can come and put a sticker on their shirt or not if they don't want to, get some candy, and just check in and, again, build community and be surrounded by other people who are sober. And then at set break, we have a meeting. The meeting's not affiliated with NA or AA or any other, group. It is solely focused on that day and community at that show. And I was really attracted to that. I thought that was a really relatable message. And once I started doing that service work because I needed to, so I can get into the show because I didn't have money, I felt good. And I was like, I want to continue doing that. And so I continued volunteering to host tables even after I could afford the concert ticket. And I really enjoyed being the guy who saw somebody eyeballing the table and going over to them and saying hello. And I enjoyed talking to people who said, I'm not sober, but my uncle or my cousin or my son or my brother, I wish he was, and I'm going to take this information, and if they ever are open to it, I'm going to give it to them. And, I do love being there when somebody has their like, I'm freaking out right now, and this is a safe place for me to hang out. And concerts are a slippery environment, whether you're somebody who loves drugs or somebody who's a drinker or anything in between, like concerts could be a slippery environment. And the ability for us to have this safe space, for lack of a better term, in that environment is pretty fucking fantastic, and the community
Yeah,
has
it's pretty
grown
amazing.
drastically. There's now a yellow balloon community at Packers games, and
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
I didn't know that
Yeah.
either. Are
yes,
these tables sponsored by the band, or how does that work?
yeah. So we're autonomous. So we're not officially affiliated with the band, but the band allows us to come to the venue and not have to pay for our tickets. So they put us on the guest list. And so we set up, we're there before the show starts, and we're there the whole time. So we don't represent the band and we're not affiliated with the band, but we are there as a service to the community at the behest of the band.
Mm-hmm. So is it the kind of thing where you go to out of town shows and do this too?
On occasion, I don't follow. There's nobody. I have a full-time job. I've got a family, and I lead a fairly busy life. But New Year's of this year, I went to Chicago for 4 concerts with a band called Humphreys McGee, and I participated in hosting the table among a bunch of other really wonderful volunteers who did that as well. I go to Alpine Valley in Wisconsin whenever Fish plays, and this summer I had to miss, but normally one of the 3 or 4 nights I'll volunteer to host the table.
Were you involved with Much Obliged from the beginning?
Yeah, so when
you're
the
one
idea,
of the moderators on the group, I think, right?
yeah, so when Much Obliged started,
Which is the Humphreys McGee.
Humphreys McGee, yeah. So
Is it
the
Facebook
Much Obliged is the
group, or-
Humphreys McGee Yellow Balloon group. So when that group started, it was a few friends who were like, "Hey, we think that the band would be open to us having a presence. Would anybody be interested?" And I raised my hand to be the Midwest coordinator, and I did that for 3 or 4 years, and then there was some internal shifting and somebody needed to step up to be the national coordinator, and I stepped up, and I've been doing that since I believe 2011-ish or so.
Nice. Is there a lot of work? Because I'm sure there's a lot of work behind the scenes that people, even myself, who's been involved with these yellow balloon groups, don't see.
Teamwork makes the dream work.
Yeah. I mean, I should say alcoholics and addicts aren't known for their organizational skills. And then you mix in former jam band hippie kids with that. And I can imagine there's a lot of moving pieces to try and coordinate.
So there's a lot of moving pieces. There are some tours that we are a well-oiled machine and are impeccable. And there are days when I get phone calls like, "Hey, this didn't go so well." And sometimes I have to make some phone calls and be like, "Hey, you guys got to do what you say you were going to do." And sometimes I say, "I fucked up and I didn't do what I said I was going to do." And, I tell the bands that we work with or that I'm working with that our goal is that our yellow balloon experience at your show is the easiest part of your day, right? We don't want you to have to run around and coordinate. Like It should be a well-oiled machine. And I'd say we have a 90% success rate, not 100% success rate on being the easiest part of somebody's day. And I'm sure if you asked every person who's involved in the yellow balloon community, they'd give you another number. But we
I'd
we
love
do
to
our
work
best.
a table someday. I'd love to get on a table someday.
Well, I'll talk to Mark and make sure you're qualified.
Yeah. I got it. I just hit a year and 3 months, right? What's that? Over a year you got to have to work a table?
Yeah, we have a 1-year
he's ditching
requirement.
us, Mark. He's moving on.
Can you, Benji? Can you tell
And
us?
you have a podcast, Benji. Do you need another host on the podcast too?
Oh,
I'd like
God.
to-
Trust me, you don't.
Welcome to our world.
Let me ask you this though. Can you tell us what bands have these type of groups right now?
Sure. So probably the most well-known is the Fellowship, is the Fish Yellow Balloon community, and the War Frats are the Grateful Dead Yellow Balloon community.
I love that.
Widespread Panic has a group called the Gateway. Much Obliged is the Humphreys McGee community. Mo has the Happy Hour Heroes. The String Cheese Incident has the Jellyfish. The Disco Biscuits have the Digital Buddhas. Actually, if anybody's a fan of Tyler Childers, we just started a community called the Grindstone.
I was there in Saratoga.
Were you? Good for you,
Yeah.
man. Good for you. That is awesome. Who else? J-Rad has a
Daggies?
group. What's that?
Dusty Baggies.
Dusty
Billy
Baggies.
Strang.
Yeah, for Billy Strings.
Which
I'm missing a lot. Goose
But
has a band called
Hot
Goose
Tea
has a
Party?
group called the Hot Tea Party.
if somebody goes to a show and they're trying to find one of these tables or people, is there an actual yellow balloon?
There are actual yellow balloons. Yeah, actually, if you look at my microphone here, it says one show at a time,
Yep.
Yeah.
and that is the reference. That is our sort of our tagline. So if you see a yellow balloon and or something that says one show at a time, that's referring
you're
to
in.
recovery in the music scene. And that the name of the podcast that I have is called One Show at a Time, a Yellow Balloon Experience. And
Nice.
where we talk to
Where can people find your podcast?
Spotify if you're a child, Apple Podcasts if you're an adult.
Stop.
We've got Pandora listeners.
Because
Audible.
I always listen to Spotify.
Yeah.
Does that mean I'm an old man?
Emotionally.
I'm an Apple podcast guy.
Yeah, I'm an Apple
Isn't there
Pod.
something called there's a new one out that's really getting really big. It'll come to me, but
So there's YouTube podcasts and SoundCloud, and we're on all those things.
Yeah.
I stick to Apple Podcasts. It's simple.
yeah.
And it's called what again?
It's called One Show at a Time, a Yellow Balloon Experience.
What's it about?
We talk to and hear from. So we have a speaker meeting every Friday night. Speaker meeting started when COVID hit. In the Yellow Balloon community, we started a nightly Zoom meeting, and it was very much a fellowship meeting that was sort of open to everybody and loosely people talking about their day and recovery. And I wanted something a little bit more focused on recovery itself. So I started a Friday night speaker meeting and a Sunday night big book study. And we, every week since March of 2020, have been doing Friday night speaker meeting and Sunday night big book study. And about 2 years ago, somebody was like, hey, man, I can't come to this week's speaker meeting, but could you just press record on Zoom and send me the recording afterwards? And I was like, if everybody's okay with that, sure.
Yeah.
And a couple weeks later, somebody was like, hey, I saw that you recorded a couple weeks ago. Would you mind doing that again? And I was like, if everybody's okay with it, sure. And a couple weeks later, I was like, somebody said, well, if you're recording the Zooms, it's essentially a podcast. And I was like, I've been thinking about doing this for a long time. And so we just upgraded the, microphone situation a little bit. And so we record the speaker meeting, and then we interview the person who shared the next day or the following week or two. And so the podcast is the interview with that person and then the share. So the podcast is about an hour and 20 minutes, give or
Listen to a
take a
couple
little.
episodes. It's really good. I enjoy it.
I'm glad to hear that.
Can you talk about? I'd love to hear just a story of one of your coolest experiences working a table, or just one of the coolest moments that you've experienced being involved with the Yellow Balloon Group or working a table or being at a show. I don't know if you got one off the top of your head. I know I'm putting you on the spot a little bit.
No, I'm trying to think of what is the best, and I can't tell you what the best is because that's too subjective. But in 2012, I was at the Fillmore in downtown Detroit, and I was behind the table. I was hosting the table, and this goofy kid walks up to me and says, "Are you much obliged?" And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "Are you actually sober and clean?" And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "For real?" And I was like, "Get to it, my man. Like, what do you need to know? What would you like to know?" And he's like, "I'm sober." He didn't say sober. He said, "I'm clean. I'm struggling. I'm with some friends who are not clean. And they were supposed to be, and I'm not having a good time." And I was like, "Cool. Well, hang out with me and these guys, and you're going to have a good time." His name is Will, and he's one of my best friends now. And we have gone to countless shows together. We've driven hours and hours and hours and hundreds of miles to various cities to go to shows together. When I need somebody to make me feel good, I call him, and when he needs somebody to make him feel good, he calls me. And he is one of the most wonderful, spiritual, beautiful people I've ever met in my life. And he was early in recovery, and he was coming to this concert with some friends who were supposed to be sober, and they ended up not. And he was bumming. And one of the guys was like, well, just go hang out with the sober people. And he was like, what sober people? What are you talking about? He's like, the Yellow Balloon Group. And he was like, what are you talking about? And this guy who was high, who was supposed to be clean, tells him about Much Obliged. And he came to find us. And I am eternally grateful for this man.
Right.
He's a good dude.
That's the whole deal right there. That's what it's for, right?
Yep.
How I mean, I've had similar experiences to that. I remember I was at the Goose Show in Canandaigua, and I was having a good time in the beginning, first set. I've told this actually, I think on the last time I was on the podcast. And I'm watching the show, but I'm still kind of scanning the crowd a little bit and like noticing what people are walking by with drinking, trying to guess like what that guy's on, you know. And I remember I went to the porta potty to use the bathroom, and in the stall next to me in the porta potty, I hear. And I'm like, all right. And sure enough, set break, I go looking for the table, and there's no table. But I see a guy wearing a one show at a time shirt. And I go, Bud, is there a meeting? And he's like, yeah, over near this tree. I'm like, perfect. We go over to the tree, probably had like 15 or 16 of us. And their set break was like a half hour long. We had basically a full meeting. And that second set, I've never been more relaxed, more focused, more in tune, and had more. I'm getting goosebumps right now talking about it. And I've never had more fun at a show in my entire life. And it was all because of that set break meeting and I'm just going in with just this refreshed mindset, you know. I guess you not to switch subjects quickly, but you said you sponsor people. When I got out of rehab, I had fish tickets for Fish in Syracuse. I think it was 2 weeks after I got out of rehab, and I talked to some people.
You were still bouncing around the room at that time?
Oh, somebody Googled.
You see what I did there?
I saw you looking at
No, that
songs.
wasn't from that. No, when I was originally in college, I got into this a little
Did
bit.
you? Okay.
Hey, Mark,
And
can you
that's
turn
one of
off
the ones that
his
stuck with me.
Can you turn off his microphone, please?
What?
If you're gonna throw a lyric, throw a good one.
I guess I'm gonna have to.
You know what's funny is
talk about
I don't even know what you guys are talking about.
Yeah. I'm going to take you to a fish show. I want to take you to a fish show.
We should do like
I wouldn't necessarily hate it.
We should
what
do
I
like
get
a
for
Harris
trying.
Whittles, analyze that podcast where we take Mark to a fish show and record the whole experience.
I
Thank
think
God this is away from me.
that
now.
would be. I would love to do just a whole video series of me putting Mark in situations that I love and seeing how he reacts to them.
You do it almost every day for us.
But anyway, so
See, hang on a second now. Just FYI,
Yeah, it's on now, bitch.
he's a musician.
FYI, Benji, I'm in a sober band. All the guys are in AA, and we play out all the time. We play out in bars, we play out in clubs and casino, and we play all over the place. And we have a good AA following.
And they're good.
And, yeah, and
I'm a musical snob
well,
too.
we don't have a yellow balloon table at our shows.
You are the yellow balloon table at the
The
show.
yellow balloon stage.
You should just hang a yellow balloon on the stage.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
It really is.
That's a really good idea. Yeah.
I gotta slap a sticker on your guitar and the drum kit and just.
Yeah.
That's another question
Just
I
slap
have.
it on
I've
that.
looked all over for these stickers online, on Amazon and everywhere. Where do you get the stickers?
You got to know somebody, man.
I know you now.
Shit.
There you go.
Anyway,
Well,
so
the first one's free.
I want to roll.
Nice.
I want to. I want
Make
to.
sure you tell
roll.
your friends where you got it.
Yeah.
See, Brett, Mark knows how to drop a one-liner.
There you go.
I'm gonna be calling you at 3 a.m. like I need those stickers.
You know I'm gonna be thinking
Scratch and
about this
sniff.
all night long now.
Yeah, you can't say things like that to Brett.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
Benji.
Hang on, I got.
Matt's got one more question
I got
for you.
to finish it up.
Okay.
So I had the fish tickets, and they talked me out of going to the concert. Even knowing the yellow balloon groups are there and stuff, how long would you recommend somebody is sober for before they kind of dive into this? Because even with the table, I don't know if 2 weeks if I would have been ready for that environment.
It's tough.
There is not an answer that anybody can give you to that question that's based on a timeline that is an accurate answer.
Yeah.
My experience is that of AA. And the big book tells us that if we're spiritually fit, we can go anywhere if there's a purpose. And so if a sponsee has 3 weeks and is into it and is doing the work and is committed to going to a show with sober buddies and is going to check in at the table and is going to participate in the solution and wants to go to the show, I'm not going to say don't go. And somebody can have 5 years and be fucking miserable and not be spiritually fit and go to the show and relapse. And so the answer is not based on how much time you have. The answer is how spiritually fit are you? Because at the end of the day, it's a slippery environment. It smells like weed. It smells like beer. There's people offering drugs. It's a tough place for somebody who's not ready to do that. And so, you know, there is no accurate cookie cutter answer.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. And then before we get done here, I just want to ask you, is there anything else you're involved with? Anything else you're working on? Anything else you want to say before we let you go here?
I'm just grateful to be asked to be here and be able to talk about the Yellow Balloon community. And I'm geeked. I think this was a blast.
I'm a little geeked too.
Yeah, it's gonna be fun. It'll be fun when it comes out. It'll be fun to hear people's comments too. And I'm sure there's a lot of people, older people like myself, who are like, "Well, wait, what is this?" It's a great idea. It's just a really cool
fantastic
thing. Yeah,
I'd love to
Talk about practicing these principles in all our fairs.
Yeah, all our fairs.
I'd like to see the venues start to just be the ones that every show that comes through. Yellow Balloon Table.
You're barking up the right tree there. That conversation is happening.
Oh, really?
Yep.
It's not going to go anywhere tomorrow.
I love conversation.
It's not going to go anywhere tomorrow.
And I
love being involved in things.
Yes,
I like the football game thing too. That makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah.
It's
So
another environment where it's just all beer, you know.
And society's moving towards it.
Yeah.
Actually.
Yeah.
Seeing that.
Yeah, so a friend of ours named John, who lives in Green Bay and who goes to every home game, who's a member of the fellowship, who approached the team a few years ago and said, "Hey, this is a real thing. Would you be open to having a table?" And their Facebook group is super active. Their fan base is super active. They've been on I think it was CBS or NBC. Like they did a news story about them. It's wild. And, there's conversations about that spreading, to other sports teams as well.
That's great. Well, Benji, we've really want to thank you for coming on. It was you were a great guest, and the information is fantastic as well as your story. And we want to thank you for that. And so until next time on the Glum Lot Podcast, I'm Mark.
I'm Brett.
I'm Matt.
And I'm Benji.
As we wrap up another episode of the Glum Lot Podcast, we want to extend our heartfelt gratitude to each and every one of you who tuned in today. Navigating the path to recovery from alcohol and other substances is a journey filled with challenges, triumphs, and self-discovery. Remember, we're not affiliated with Alcoholics Anonymous, but we're here to provide a safe space for open conversations about the complexities of recovery. Your stories, courage, and resilience inspire us and our listeners alike. If you or someone you know is on the transformative journey, know that you're not alone. Join us next time as we continue to explore the diverse facets of recovery. Until then, stay strong, stay connected, and remember that each day is a step towards a brighter, sober tomorrow. Thank you for being part of the Glum Lot community.